All right, let's get started here. Good morning and welcome everyone. My name is Elizabeth Sinclair Hank and it's my honor to welcome you to this morning's session, From Policy to Practice, Law Enforcement and Psychiatric Crisis Response. I hope everyone is enjoying the conference so far. I am a member of the Global Law Enforcement and Public Health Association, as well as the Law Enforcement and Mental Health Special Interest Group, and actually also live here in the Philadelphia area. Although I'm really looking forward to welcoming you all to our great city, it is still wonderful to be able to reconnect and participate in this conference. LEPH is truly unique in bringing together so many people with very diverse backgrounds and experience from all over the world, so welcome. I'm the Director of Research for the Treatment Advocacy Center, where I lead the organization's Office of Research and Public Affairs. The Treatment Advocacy Center is a national nonprofit dedicated to improving access to treatment for people with severe mental illness, including schizophrenia and severe bipolar disorder. We are the only national US nonprofit that focuses exclusively on individuals with the most severe psychiatric diseases. We work in all 50 states and at the national level to support and pass new laws, policies, and practices designed to improve access to treatment for people with serious mental illness. The Office of Research and Public Affairs was established in 2015 as an educational program to address the role and impacts of severe mental illness on public service systems, focusing on topics that are overlooked or ignored by governments and other agencies. We conduct independent research on the effects of serious mental illness on individuals, families, and communities. Some examples of this work include the role of severe mental illness in fatal law enforcement encounters, the extreme shortage of psychiatric beds, as well as severe mental illness and superutilization. In addition to conducting independent research, ORPA also publishes a weekly blog titled Research Weekly, which aims to synthesize complex topics around serious mental illness in an easy to understand way. You can find all of our reports and subscribe to Research Weekly on our website, treatmentadvocacycenter.org. So the goal of this morning's workshop is to better understand the significance of various influences in advancing best practices in community and court-based programs designed to reduce law enforcement and psychiatric crisis response. The workshop will have 3 parts. The first is a video in which a mother shares how the mental health and criminal justice system responded to the progression of her daughter's illness and how that experience influenced her to become a community activist. The second part is an interactive discussion moderated by Pennsylvania journalist Brett Schultes, in which local community leaders and other experts respond to a mock mental health crisis. After that, you'll have an opportunity to engage in a question and answer session with the expert panelists who are all on your screen here from the mock crisis discussion and to share everyone's takeaways. So please feel free to use both the chat function as well as the Q&A throughout the session. We can respond to easy questions in the chat as the videos are going on, and then try to respond to your questions in the Q&A session to as many as we can. So to start, set the stage for today's workshop, and for a vivid reminder of why we're all engaged in this work, I'd like to play the short video about Bucks County, Pennsylvania resident Martha Stringer, who in the wake of her daughter's illness has become a mental health expert in her own right, an advocate, and a powerful force for change. Amy, if you could play Martha's video, please.
My name is Martha Stringer. I've been married for close to 33 years and have 3 children. We're in Yardley, Pennsylvania. It's about 25 miles north of Philadelphia. My oldest is Kim, born on a beautiful sunny Saturday, May 16th, 1992. Sometimes you'll get pushback from a kid, but with her, it wouldn't be just pushback. It could be an hour-long tantrum over asking her to complete a simple task. Her temper tantrums could be violent. There would be a lot of screaming and yelling, punching a hole through the drywall, cut holes in my sweater, or wrench my glasses when I left them on the kitchen counter. She stands about 5'11". Physically, that wasn't going to be the answer. To be able to pick her up and put her in a room, that wasn't an option anymore. We tried rewards for days of good behavior. We tried punishment, of course, and nothing really seemed to motivate her. We developed that philosophy of don't poke the bear, yes, because if you did, it could ruin the family outing, the trip to the restaurant, the vacation. She got through high school. It was difficult. Collectively, we decided that she could try Bucks County Community College. I came to find out about 3 or 4 weeks into the school year that she had not been going to classes. She had just been leaving the house and driving around. She had a series of jobs, mostly retail. She lost every job she had. During one of the final phone calls with Kim, Kim said, yeah, I'm going to come over there and kill you if you call me again. She got arrested for shoplifting 2 6-packs of beer from a local grocery store. She got into a little tussle with the store workers. That was the beginning of the criminal activity. She's had over 52 encounters with the local police in the town where she lives, and many encounters in the town where I live. She often carried around a backpack full of trash. I opened up the backpack and found in there a decomposing robin.
All right, well, let's go ahead and bury it.
I can't.
You can bury the bird.
Him!
I know, but like what? Like
It's a dead
yeah, but
bird.
you guys are like you're recording me on your phone.
Yes.
You're recording. Your dad is about to call the psychiatrist because I picked up a dead bird.
Because no, you didn't
because
just
I picked up a dead bird.
You didn't just pick it up, Kim. You've been carrying it around in your bag,
Okay, but
and it's decomposing.
Yeah, that was pretty horrifying as a mother to find her in possession of dead birds. To get someone help when they don't want it and they don't recognize they need it requires crisis. There has to be an imminent, immediate threat of serious bodily harm to self or others before you can even take the steps to get involuntary treatment. The last time she was at the house was April 13th of 2020. The next day, she allegedly punched the woman that lived in the other part of the house where she lived, and the police were called and she was arrested. I felt like we missed such an opportunity. Without AOT, without those kinds of services in place that address the needs of people like my daughter, she was just allowed to slide right back into her psychosis and her destructive behavior. I think it could have saved us all a lot of heartache. I think there's a lot of misconception about the cost it takes to start the program. I think there's a misconception about the amount of money it saves. I can't exactly put a dollar amount on what it's cost me and my family and the county over the last 10 years with Kim and her interactions with the police and her hospitalizations and her incarcerations. With us not being allowed to get her help, it violates her civil rights for quality care. And it violates my civil rights, I believe, as a parent, to get her the care that I know that she needs desperately. I emailed just about everybody whose email I could track down. I've written letters to the editor about mental health court and about implementing AOT. It was really in desperation that I first reached out to a reporter in 2019 when Kim was deteriorating so badly. And he agreed to do a story about our struggles. With the help of social media, the story really was viral in my community. And I think it helped, and it also shed a lot of light on how families like mine struggle with the current structure of the system. Keep a lot of notes. Keep everything written down because it helps you understand the progression and the timeline, but it also helps you put things in perspective. We have to remember that elected officials, they work for the betterment of the people in the community. People are coming to the table to have those very important conversations, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. I think you learn to appreciate the small goals and the small steps and the small achievements as you're making your way toward the big goal. We as a community and a country could care better for the people who, through no fault of their own, have an illness that is stigmatized, undertreated, untreated, and ruins their quality of life. But I never lost hope.
I'm pleased to report that Martha Stringer is here with us today. Martha, thank you so much for sharing your powerful story and your knowledge with us, and know that we also continue to have hope for you, for Kim, and for all of our loved ones with severe mental illness. Really looking forward to our discussion later on in the session where we can talk about how we can all work together to better protect people with severe mental illness.
Thank you for having me.
Now, to help us better understand how community leaders respond to a crisis like Kim's and how we can prevent these crises from spiraling out of control in the first place, we will view a recorded interactive discussion of a simulated mental health crisis. Leading this discussion is Brett Schultes, a health reporter at Harrisburg NPR affiliate WITF, whose 2019 profile of Kim Stringer won a regional Edward R. Murrow Award and helped succeed in getting her moved from a county jail to a psychiatric hospital. The discussion participants reflect considerable and diverse expertise. You can find bios for all of the discussion participants in the session information on the HUPA conference platform. This video runs approximately 50 minutes, and make sure you stay for afterwards, because after the video, all of the participants will join us for a live discussion and Q&A period. Amy, if you could please play the next video.
Welcome to Communities Changing Minds, How Crises Spur Action. My name is Brett Schultes. I'm the Transforming Health Reporter at WITF, a public radio station out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I cover health policy and community health issues that affect Pennsylvanians. The guests today in our scenario-based discussion in order of appearance are Fred Herron, Director of Public Safety, Bensalem Township Police Department in Bucks County, Sabah Mohammed, Policy Counsel at Treatment Advocacy Center, Matt Weintraub, District Attorney in Bucks County, Benjamin Barsky, Legal Research Fellow at Scattergood Program for Applied Ethics of Behavioral Health Care, Oscar Kazin, Judge, Bexar County, Texas Probate Court, Eric Smith, Bexar County, Texas AOT graduate, and Elizabeth Sinclair Hank, Director of Research at Treatment Advocacy Center. The year is 2019. Derek is a man in his late 20s. He's staying at an extended stay hotel in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. Now, Bensalem is located in Bucks County, just north of Philadelphia. The county has a population of about 630,000 people. Derek has untreated schizophrenia, but has been managing to meet his basic needs, and he's keeping it to himself for the most part. One day, he turns on the TV and only gets static. He's convinced that the CIA is trying to get a message to him, but he can't interpret it. He goes to the lobby to tell the hotel clerk what's happening and to ask him if he can get help to interpret the message. The hotel clerk tells him no, and Derek starts to argue with him loudly. The hotel clerk is worried the situation will get out of hand, so he calls the police and asks them to send a crisis intervention team trained officer. Fred, you are a highly trained police officer. What do you do when you arrive on scene?
First, we want to try to talk with Derek as best as we can. Obviously, if he's suffering from a mental breakdown at this particular time, it's going to be a lot more difficult. We're going to try to want to establish where he's from. Does he have any relatives? Is there anybody that's staying with him at the hotel? Where is his actual address? Where is his his abode, and try to research a little bit more to see if we can get someone out there to help him before we go down any other paths. Certainly, if it results into a situation where he is causing a major disturbance or he's a danger to himself and others, then we'll have to take other actions. But our first sense would really to be just to kind of get him calmed down and possibly get him with some sort of family member or someone that could at least care for him before we had to take it any further.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really balancing a couple of different things there. Is that right? A couple of different priorities that you have.
One of the things with police work in general is that no two calls, no 2 days, no 2 minutes are exactly the same. So every person that you encounter, every individual that you encounter, whether they're a victim of a crime, whether they're suffering from a drug addiction, or they're suffering from some mental health issue, has to be handled differently. So, but you want to find that balance with that person. You want to find where is that common ground, where is that middle ground, because what you don't want to do is you certainly don't want this situation escalated to a situation where you might have to take him into custody, because that might not be the proper avenue for Derek. Trying to get him somewhere safe would be the best case scenario, but you also want to make sure that he is safe and the people you are getting him to are safe, because it is unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen to him in a minute or two. If he thinks it's the CIA through a television now, what could it be in 10 minutes? So it is a very, very fine balance. And, as we know, police don't receive a ton of training in this area. There's so many avenues of law enforcement and other social issues that we're involved with. In CIT training, you get 40 hours, you can get 80 hours, depending on some of the other training. Officers might advance to more than that, but we're not sending them out much more than that type of training. So it really is we're trying to, put a Band-Aid sometimes on a bleeding artery. And that only holds for so long. And if it's really that bad of a situation, that Band-Aid won't hold at all. So we're going to want to try to find, at least in this case, at this time, the situation hasn't escalated. We're going to want to try to reach out to a relative or someone that could take care of Derek so we can get him through and maybe get him into some help, some treatment before we get him involved with the criminal justice system.
This scenario, the understanding is that you recognize Derek because you've been called to similar instances in the past.
Right.
And you've come to know his sister, Sabah, who in this scenario is his advocate. So, Sabah, you're Derek's sister. You receive a call from your friend, Fred. He tells you about the incident with your brother and asks whether you want him to take Derek to the hospital or arrest him for disturbing the peace and take him to jail. What do you tell him?
Well, I'm very lucky that someone in the community knows him and can call me. Before anyone became familiar with him, it was sirens and guns and screams for him to comply with communication that he doesn't understand. So just the fact that I know that Fred is out there is calming, but it's still difficult. The decision between help and jail is no decision at all. It's hell. When he was first diagnosed, naively, I thought schizophrenia, of course he's going to the hospital and I'll get my brother back, but that never happens. He goes into the hospital and he comes right out because they're only dealing with the loudest crisis. And because his psychosis isn't loud and he doesn't have a knife in his hand, he gets right back on the street and finds his way right back to me, still trying to interpret messages, and he doesn't get help. If he sits quietly in the hospital, even while his psychosis is going on, he'll come right back out and be in the exact same place. And we've been cycling through this for years. As much as it shames me to say it, jail is where he'll be safe. I know he won't start fights, and I know he get 3 meals a day. He'll be where I can see him. It's through plate glass, and he has that orange jumpsuit like a criminal, but that's the best of the worst choices that I have right now.
So in this scenario, Sabah calls me. She's been following my work as a reporter for many years and knows I take an interest in mental health issues. She tells me what happened and that she's angry that the police had no choice but to take her ill brother to jail. I decided to write an article. I called the Treatment Advocacy Center to see if they have any research into this issue. And there, Elizabeth, the Director of Research at Treatment Advocacy Center, what did you tell me in this scenario?
Yes, well, first I want to thank you, Brett, for covering this important issue. I believe that the more we get this, the failures of the mental health system into the public awareness, the more we are able to produce change. So unfortunately, the situation is all too common and happens throughout the country. I conducted a research study in 2019 where I surveyed law enforcement departments throughout the country to try to understand and quantify their role in psychiatric crisis response, specifically looking at that encounter when an individual is in mental health crisis and the transportation of that individual to wherever the officer decides to bring that person. We found that the distance to transport someone to a mental health facility is 5 times farther than if that officer was to transport someone to jail. So purely just the time and distance that the officers and law enforcement have to make every day, it incentivizes the criminalization of mental illness.
Talk a little bit more about that, if you could, Elizabeth. When you say it incentivizes the criminalization of mental illness, it sounds like you're just saying that it's easier to not, take that person to a inpatient mental health facility. I have a feeling, though, it's not just about the ease of it. Are there other factors as well that we haven't mentioned yet?
Since the peak of psychiatric inpatient hospital beds starting in the 1950s, we have lost 97% of our psychiatric hospital treatment beds. in that same amount of time, the number of people with serious mental illness who are incarcerated has climbed exponentially. It's the failures of the mental health crisis treatment system has resulted in an enormous number of people with serious mental illness entering into the criminal justice system.
Well, let's talk more about that. District Attorney Weintraub, your office is responsible for developing the case against Derek. You're familiar with him because he's been arrested for minor offenses in the past. You're frustrated that this case and others like it are taking up valuable resources. And those are resources your office needs to hold serious criminals accountable for their crimes. So what do you do in this case, District Attorney?
It's a great question, Brett. First of all, I want to stress that not only am I concerned about the utilization of limited resources, but I care about Derek. I think that once somebody that suffers from mental illness is prone to commit low-level criminal offenses or even moderate criminal offenses, they get caught in a spin cycle, caught between a rock and a hard place. And as Elizabeth said, or as Sabah said, there is no good place. The least evil sometimes is that they get sent to jail, but that is far, far from a perfect fit. It's no fit at all, frankly. So one of the things that we have, at least now, we have some specialists that are very adept at handling and working through the mental health system as prosecutors. But we need a better and a bigger system even than that. And so a couple of years ago, I entreated the Quattrone Center for Fair Administration of Justice at the Penn Law School to do some research for us and author a report. Benjamin Barsky, who's on this call, he was the primary author of that report. And the report, frankly, contained no surprises, but it really made it, it summarized it and made it very digestible for not only me, but for all of the stakeholders in the county to consider the efficacy and the value of having a mental health court here in Bucks County, so that when somebody like Derek does get enmeshed in the criminal justice system, we will, I should say, because it's not completed yet, we will have a mechanism for which to treat Derek, to address his specific needs, not just Derek, but every person like Derek who has that type of dual issues, whether that's mental health or drug and alcohol, and some type of criminal conduct for which they have to be held accountable. So the stakeholders here in Bucks County have bought into that. It is an onerous process because we're starting from scratch. We have a bunch of disparate pieces that we've cobbled together, sort of a helpful system for these people, but we need to do a better job, and the stakeholders here are well on their way. I've been told, my fingers are crossed, I've been told that we will have a mental health court here in Bucks County by the end of this year, and I'm very encouraged by that. It's very much needed here.
Well, that's really encouraging to hear. I wonder if you can just take another minute to just talk a little bit more about how mental health court would differ from what you already have established, for the person who's not really familiar with that nuance.
Absolutely, Brett. The difference as I envision it is that a person who has pretty obvious mental illness issues or has been diagnosed in the past or even is readily apparent, they will immediately be diverted to this mental health court. They won't have to wait for their formal arraignment date. They won't have to wait for their preliminary hearing. They won't have to wait for a trial date. We will attempt to get them assessed more immediately, get them the resources, whether it be medication or treatment that they need much, much earlier in the process. And if there's a way to divert them, whether it be via pretrial supervision or bail, into the treatment protocol that they need so that they're not just languishing in prison, that's the objective. And then certainly the end goal is to make sure that whatever resolution that case required not only keeps the public safe and gives the public redress, which they're entitled to certainly, but will address the issues, specific mental health issues of a person like Derek, because the goal, frankly, is to make Derek as healthy as he can possibly be so that we never have to interact with him again in the criminal justice system. That's a win for everybody.
Thanks for that detail. Let's actually take it over to Ben. In this scenario, Ben, you receive a call from the district attorney asking for a report. So what do you do from there?
Thanks, Brett. Well, the report has to locate Derek's story within broader trends that have already been spoken about, where criminalization of people with mental disorders have been staggering and to many degrees disturbing. And we have to evaluate how a mental health court can and cannot help. And to do so, we really have to rely on the evidence and the broad base of research that has been produced in this area. And really, there's three characteristics, if you will, that have been spotlighted through this research, kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you will. I'll start with the good. It's been alluded to already, but we know that jails, prisons, other detention facilities for people with mental disorders are very corrosive environments. And so the value of the mental health court is, of course, the diversionary process. And the report has to touch on the logistics of that process, bringing together multiple parties. We're talking the judges, members of the prosecution team, public defenders, members of government services, and bring those individuals together to create this diversionary process. And in addition to these logistics, there's really two elements or ingredients that this report has to touch on. The first one being the mental health care element of the court, which is we need to have a network of providers, both mental health and substance abuse providers in case of co-occurring disorders. And what's extremely important and to keep in mind, and this is what the research kind of bears out, is the importance of informed consent and for participants to be buying into a tailored plan. So in this way, it's a two-way street where the more an individual can participate in their plan and feel empowered and self-determined through that treatment plan, the higher the success rate. And that goes hand in hand with the second element, which is really the community supports. And what do I mean by the community supports? Housing resources, health insurance in case the participant needs it, transportation services, identification services, right? Every single one of these resources, a lack of them is a determinant for worsened conditions. So it's very important to keep those elements in mind. And then the report has to touch on what a mental health court cannot do. The research so far is very clear that mental health disorders, the same way as COVID-19 in many ways, are tied to structural factors. And what do I mean by that? Segregation, poverty, structural racism, all of these problems are not necessarily those that the mental health court are going to solve. In fact, the mental health courts are not going to solve these issues. So the mental health court is one intervention along a broad spectrum of interventions that are necessary to unravel the criminalization of people with mental health conditions that have occurred as has been said already in the past decades. And tying into this, an issue to keep in mind, and DA Weintraub alluded to this, and I think this is a point to emphasize, mental health courts that are least restrictive, and what I mean by that is the stricter that a court is, the more or the less we're affording the opportunity for participants to enjoy the benefits of the court, to divert back into the community, and to enjoy economic self-sufficiency, self-determination, and for them to be pulled out of the system entirely. So this process of the two-way street, the engagement on both sides of the process is very, very necessary. And the more that we can eschew reliance on unnecessary coercive devices, the more the research shows that mental health courts will have success. So those are the ingredients of the mental health court that the report will bear upon.
Now let's check back in with Derek. While in jail, Derek is found incompetent to stand trial. He's placed in the state hospital for 4 weeks, is restored to competency, and returns to jail to face charges. Given the combined amount of time he spent in jail and at the hospital, the DA agrees to dismiss the charges. Sabah picks him up from jail and brings him to a homeless shelter because her husband has made it clear that Derek cannot live with them unless he gets treatment for his illness. After living in the homeless shelter for 30 days, a place is found for him in a group home. For the first few months, things go well for Derek. He decides to stop taking his medication though, because according to him, he never really needed it in the first place. One day, Derek leaves the group home and wanders into traffic where he's knocked to the ground by a car. A medic provides first aid. When it becomes clear to him that Derek is delusional, the medic transports him to the emergency department. There, Derek is involuntarily committed to the hospital. He remains in the psychiatric unit for 5 days and is discharged. After returning to the group home, Sabah is informed that he will not be able to remain there if he does not take his medication. Remembering what she learned in her NAMI family-to-family class about assisted outpatient treatment, Sabah makes inquiries to find out if there's an AOT program in Bucks County. So Sabah, your brother's refusing to take his medications and is at risk of losing his spot at the group home. What's going through your head right now?
Terrified. Housing is one of the most difficult parts to secure. I have spent at least 48 hours each time this cycle happens trying to find housing. There are homes that won't take him if he has a record, homes, and disturbing the peace would disqualify him from those homes. There are homes that you have to have insight to your illness. And of course, this is one because they want that medication compliance. Some homes don't know anything about SMI and they're just as bad. He'll run away. I've found him on my porch or park benches, and AOT seems like the right thing. They want medication compliance. We all want Derek to take his medication. So they'll help him come to that decision under the watchful eye of a judge and a team, and everybody wins. Derek has a shot to thrive. He gets a chance to have his dignity back. My family did not make the decision lightly to not allow him to live with us. The last time he did, he woke us up throughout the night complaining of telepathic messages. We could not work the next day. We're always taking time off to either find him, attend to his housing, or just put our wellness first. And with AOT, he stays in the community, he stays in his housing, and we have a better chance of getting my brother back, somebody who wants to contribute to the world and thrive with his family. Really important for Bucks County to take seriously implementing AOT into our communities. I think AOT, assisted outpatient treatment, would be great for Derek because it's another tool in the toolbox. I make calls for housing, medication, doctors, anyone who will work with him. And if he can get a court-ordered team that's in the community to help him adhere to medication, then that's one more step in the right direction. It involves a judge, but it's not criminal. And I know that can seem like an oxymoron, especially for families of color, but they don't just decide for you when you're in AOT. Your team works with you to implement a plan to get you to long-term well-being. And that's what Derek needs to get him on the right track. That's what he needs. He needs treatment before tragedy. AOT provides that. It gets your loved one, and hopefully Derek, into a safe space where police intervention will never be on the table because he is someone with a mental illness, not a criminal. And AOT provides that gateway and gets him out of the cycle.
In our scenario, Sabah calls NAMI Bucks County and is informed that there is no AOT program available in Bucks County. They explain to her that despite the law allowing for such a program, the community has decided to opt out of implementing it. Armed with this information, Sabah approaches the district attorney to ask him if he would help her advocate for an AOT program in Bucks County. And just to be absolutely clear, District Attorney Matt Weintraub has said he supports AOT, but in this scenario, he says there are some concerns about resources and some other complications. And so before he commits to her, he wants to first learn more about how other communities have overcome similar barriers. He reaches out to Bexar County, Texas, because he's heard that they have had a successful program for many years. Now, Judge Kazin, you've just received a call from District Attorney Weintraub. He tells you he's interested in learning more about AOT. He explains the concerns that others in his community have about it, and he's heard about your program and wants to know how you overcame those barriers. So what do you tell him, Judge?
I mean, the first thing I would do is, if I could, and from a long distance, give the district attorney a hug. We need more like that. In order to overcome that type of barrier, we all have to ask ourselves this question: is Derek an acceptable loss? Is it okay for us to say that Eric gets to live on a revolving door where his family and sister get to watch him deteriorate and get into the depths of the worst life you can imagine? Is that an acceptable loss? And I think once you get past that question, you start looking at what works and doesn't work. I mean, we know what works. Community mental health policing works. We know that diversion from criminal justice works. We know that increased funding for voluntary mental health services works, so that people can get help when they need it before they go into crisis. But Derek is not in that group. Derek is in the group that eats up the vast majority of our resources, who does not recognize, because of his serious illness, that he has an illness that needs to be treated. And we need to figure out a way in the community to make wellness his habit rather than illness. And if you speak to any one of his family members, they'll be the first one to scream out loud, "I can take him to as many clinics as you'd like." He's not going to cooperate. You've got to come up with a different mechanism. And assisted outpatient treatment with the help of a court, I think, is one of those mechanisms.
You know, Judge Kazin, here in Pennsylvania, a law was passed about 2 years ago that makes AOT something that counties can enact. Interestingly, no county has enacted that thus far. One thing that I hear sometimes from county mental health program coordinators is, and from others, is that they're concerned about what's essentially what they would call an unfunded mandate, or being told to provide some kind of resource without getting additional funding for it. And that's really on the backdrop of Pennsylvania having what many call relatively flat mental health funding for the past 10 years. You know, we saw actually a 10% cut in the 2011 year, and that hasn't been restored yet. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that. You know, we know that a lot of these county programs are stretched thin. They got a lot going on already. And so what do you say to someone who thinks, hey, this is just another unfunded mandate?
Well, when you look at the term unfunded mandate, I challenge people when they say that. Is it? I mean, think about it. In Pennsylvania, that same individual, Derek, if he had chosen to go to the clinic, if he had chosen to stay in the clinic, if he had chosen to access services through the community provider, they would have had to have paid for him anyway. There's no additional cost here. You're taking an individual who, rather than going through treatment, staying stable, and living within the community, is now one of the greatest resource drains in the community, because you're going to treat them at very high expense, discharge them, treat them again, discharge them, treat them again. Again, AOT is for that class of individual where involuntary treatment doesn't work. It's not something we're imposing on any person with mental illness. The first argument is it's unfunded. Is it really? I mean, the courts are funded. The judge has got a salary. The DA has got a salary. The lawyers have got a salary. We're all getting paid. The clinics are getting funded. They're not seeing anybody they wouldn't ordinarily see anyway. The difference is that AOT is a tool. The courts are able to help. And what I resist most of all in the unfunded mandate is this thought that it's an order against Derek. It's an order for Derek. It's an order with Derek. It's an order to get Derek to wellness instead of illness. And AOT, I think, succeeds in that class of people. So unfunded, depends on how you look at it. My guess is they're entitled to those services anyway. And without them, in every circumstance that we have studied, the amounts of monies that we spend on these individuals in the revolving door eat up every bit of the resources we could be devoting for individuals who want to go to voluntary services.
Well, thanks for explaining that, Judge Kazin. And I'd like to maybe follow up on just one other note on this, which is that sometimes what I hear from counties is that because it's not something that you can't compel a person to participate in the way that a judge might be acclimated to doing, that it has, so to speak, no teeth, that it sort of requires a person to go along with it. And that's something that I know other states have had success with this model, so I know there must be a way in which it can work. But, I wonder if I fully understand that.
Well, I think you begin with the premise and as follows: just because a person is seriously mentally ill, just because the illness is preventing them from living a healthy life, doesn't mean they're ignorant, doesn't mean they're stupid, and doesn't mean they're foolish. And it has been my experience that in the vast majority of the individuals who are ordered to outpatient treatment before a court, it's this thing called the black robe effect. Just because I have schizophrenia doesn't mean I don't think I know what a judge is. And I am no different than my neighbor who would stand before the judge. And yes, there are individuals who will not comply with AOT. There are individuals where the court order is as good as a piece of paper in the trash, as there are individuals on probation who fail, as there are individuals in parole who fail, as there are individuals on divorces who fail, as there are. The failure is not the reason to not look towards the AOT, because you want to look at the overwhelming success. Mind you, and for Pennsylvania, I would tell them that if they look across the nation, they will see that the vast majority of AOTs, and it's math. I mean, it's best practices. It's been studied by everyone from the state to the feds. There is anywhere from a 70 to 80% reduction in hospital rates and commitments. There is an 80 to 70% reduction in costs to those individuals across the nation. Even if it were just 50%, what would you give for Derek for him to live 1 year without going to the hospital? What would that do to our jail not having had arrested him 5 times? What would that do to Derek if he had been the next headline?
And I'd just like to follow up with you one more time, Judge Casey, because I know there's some concern that the law lacks clarity. So, maybe counties and district attorneys and agencies don't know exactly how to operationalize it. Can you speak to your experience with that as well?
Sure. Initially in any law that's written, there is always unclarity. In particular, when you do a new, what's called statutory scheme. You work through it. You pick, as we did in Bexar County, we are a 10 or 12 year success in the making. I mean, it's not, we didn't do it in one day. It took a while. So you apply the statute that you have in Pennsylvania. And in particular, Pennsylvania has a great statute that allows you to take somebody who's already in an inpatient commitment, and before you discharge them, change that to an outpatient order. So you get them stable just to the point that they're stable, and then the courts take over on the outside. Why put Derek in prison? Why put Derek in the hospital any longer than he has to be? But also recognize that Derek needs to be changed, has to be helped with a further court order. The Pennsylvania statute is pretty clear on that. There are going to be some bugs in every statute, in every state, including Texas. But you take one person, you save that person. And if it doesn't work, you fix it so you can save the next person. That argument that there's not clarity or that it's cumbersome isn't any different, I think, than either the district attorney, myself, the public defenders, the prosecutors, anyone else doesn't go through every day. And it'll work out, just as it did in Bexar County. I really don't find Pennsylvania's law that cumbersome, and it seems pretty straightforward to me. It's just a question of wanting to do it. And that's why I would end with where I started. Is Derek an acceptable loss? He's not.
Thanks for that, Judge. Eric, you've been in an AOT program. What would you tell the DA about the impact that experience had on your life?
Thank you for your question. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. Prior to being in AOT, I had a history of red flags, the type of warning signs that parents and caregivers are told to look for by counselors and educators. My grades took a turn for the worse when I was in middle school, and by the time I reached high school, I was barely passing from one year to the next. I became addicted to drugs, both prescribed and illicit. Then I dropped out of high school in my junior year, got a GED, and failed out of college in my second semester. All of this was directly related to my serious mental illness diagnosis, which at that time was bipolar disorder, but I had no ability to understand that prior to AOT. Before AOT, I didn't understand my illness, how to manage it, and I often didn't even believe I was ill at all. My relationships with my family and my friends disintegrated. Delusions, hallucinations, and paranoia eventually became a major part of my life. So much so that I was convinced I was working with the FBI and the CIA, similarly to what's been talked about earlier in this discussion. I was positive I had broken codes that gave me information to prevent assassination attempts on world leaders. I once sat awake for 3 nights in a row in a hotel surfing the internet for clues about these kind of threats. And then I showed up at my local FBI headquarters, where I delivered a psychotic rant to several visibly concerned FBI agents. Soon thereafter, I was arrested for the nonviolent offense of trespassing, an event that was a product of my unstable and deteriorated psychiatric state. After being jailed for about a month without treatment and care of any kind for mental illness, I was transferred to the San Antonio State Hospital, which is where I was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. From that point on, I had decompensated 2 more times over a few short years, each of those times followed by an AOT order. My third and final AOT order ended about 8 years ago. And since that time, I have renewed relationships with my family and myself. With thanks to my AOT treatment team, I got back on track for a healthy life. They recognized I was being held hostage by my own mind and freed me from all of that through their combined efforts of psychiatry, social work, and a civil court order. The judge overseeing my AOT order, Judge Kazin, who's part of this discussion, provided my assigned social worker time to drive me to my local community college. My social worker, that school's disability advisor, and I had a productive meeting about me getting disability accommodations so that my college experience was set up as best as possible for me to achieve my goals. My AOT team was fully invested in making sure that I could manage my diagnoses to then pursue a future of realistic goals and dreams. This was part of the discussion at each of my AOT hearings, which were meetings about my care and goals, attended by me and my AOT treatment team. Their support set me on a path that could not have existed without them. I've graduated magna cum laude with a BA in psychology and am now a graduate student pursuing a master's degree in social work so that I can help others as I've been helped. Without question, the collaboration between everyone on my AOT treatment team was the catalyst for me moving toward reality and away from insanity. And everyone on the team had a part in that. SMI presents a multifaceted gamut of very complex issues, and an AOT treatment team is a formula for success because collaboration rarely makes things worse and often makes things better. My team involved me in decisions about my care, resolved problematic and dangerous symptoms, and then released me from AOT when I was ready. Put simply, AOT saved my life by giving me the care and treatment I needed. My AOT treatment team, which consisted of a judge, psychiatrist, social worker, and others, went from being champions who helped manage my care to teaching me to be my own champion so that I didn't need them anymore. I now see a psychiatrist, get monthly lab work done, and stay mindful about engaging in healthy choices, all without the need for court-ordered AOT. My AOT treatment team worked hard so that I wouldn't need them anymore, and my family wouldn't need them anymore. There are so many families and caregivers out there struggling to get their loved ones treatment before some form of tragedy strikes, and AOT is absolutely one of the best ways to provide treatment before tragedy. I survived SMI and turned my life around, and if we want others with SMI to be able to do the same, to become healthier, better functioning members of society who can pursue goals and dreams instead of being relentlessly tortured by untreated, undertreated SMI, then we have to give cities and communities, large and small, the knowledge and tools to create and implement strong AOT laws and programs. If you take one thing away from what I say here, let it be that AOT saved my life and allowed me to find health and happiness. And with your support, it can do so for others.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story, Eric. It's really compelling, and I really appreciate you being here and being willing to talk firsthand about your experiences. Elizabeth, let's turn to you. You're the head of research at the Treatment Advocacy Center, and you've just received a call from the district attorney asking for data about the effectiveness of AOT. What's your input on this level? What's coming to mind whenever you talk with him?
Well, it's hard to provide a better argument for the role of AOT in improving lives after Eric's sharing his incredible story. But there is a robust evidence base on the effectiveness of assisted outpatient treatment. As it's been said, for some people, the overriding reason for non-treatment is an inability to recognize or acknowledge one's illness and therefore their need for treatment. This really contributes to people getting caught up in the revolving door, cycling through emergency departments, the criminal justice system, experiencing homelessness. And this is really the population for whom that assisted outpatient treatment is designed, just like this experience with Derek. The first AOT research was published in the early 1980s. However, they're still publishing new findings today. Some examples: in a study conducted in New York, researchers found that assisted outpatient treatment participants had a reduction of 83% in their arrest rate compared to the being prior they were enrolled in assisted outpatient treatment. In Florida, AOT reduced the average number of days spent in jail by 75%. In addition, it has been reported there's a 74% decline in homelessness for New York assisted outpatient treatment recipients compared to the 3 years prior to being enrolled in AOT. Research conducted in Ohio, a Summit County, Ohio program found that after 12 months of participating in an assisted outpatient treatment program, individuals experienced significant reductions in hospital admissions and the days spent hospitalized. And of course, this decline in hospitalizations and really contributes to the findings that in Ohio, AOT program resulted in a 40% reduction in cost associated with the program, because hospitalization days is one of the largest drivers of cost for this population. Similarly, in Nevada County, California, they found that for every $1 spent on their AOT program, they saved an additional $1.81 in reduced hospitalizations and incarceration costs. And I think to finish, the most compelling research finding out of all of this is an analysis of the 2016 federal grant AOT programs, which they found that 92% of participants in an AOT program agree or strongly agree with the following statement: I liked the services that I received here.
Thanks for sharing, Elizabeth. And now I'd like to turn it back over to District Attorney Weintraub to kind of, as we go towards wrapping up our discussion today and our scenario. And of course, this was a fictional scenario with a fictional person named Derek in it. District Attorney Weintraub, you know and I know that this is a fictional scenario based very much on real cases and real people who some of whom you have met or I have met. So it's very important to both of us, I know. I'd like to ask, is there additional information based on what we discussed in this scenario that you would need to respond to the concerns of people in your community, or just more broadly, you know, what have we kind of not touched on yet that you really want to focus on right now?
I think that what we've discussed today has been incredibly compelling to me. Judge Kazin very eloquently put it, but certainly no better than Eric Smith, who is living proof that AOT works. I think the issue becomes trying to transform government, which is used to the status quo and saying we can't, into an engine for change to say we can and let's solve the problem. So that's the next issue. It's a challenge. I accept the challenge, certainly here in Bucks County. And as many of you know, we are meeting to try to make some progress here. But I think that the resources are available. It's just a reallocation of resources. This has been very helpful, and I'm hopeful. I still remain hopeful that AOT can be a part of how we do things in Bucks County. And somebody has to be first in the state. The law is there. Let it. Why not Bucks? Let it be us. Bucks is best.
As to what the DA just spoke to, I have to tell you, someone does have to be first. You know, in Texas, we didn't have AOT, and for all the success Bexar County has had, we were the first ones to do it, and we had to figure out how to get there. And now, finally, other jurisdictions are beginning to follow suit, and now we have AOT starting to spread across the entire state. And I would, as a practical point, ask this. Most of us in this profession have heard of drug courts. There's now a whole army of people who are sober, a whole Bible of statistics about how effective drug courts work. I was one of those guys that was around trying to start a drug court when there wasn't one. Everything has to start. You have a functional, rational statute in Pennsylvania. You have a scheme that works, and you have people who should not be destined to be on the revolving door. And it's just that simple.
So I can quite obviously speak to the AOT program I went through because it was my personal experience, and I lucked out in having you as being the one who presided over it because you valued collaboration between all of the disciplines and types of experts that should be involved when there's complex cases of SMI like I had. There was you, there was the social worker, there was the nurse who was involved in making sure I could get my meds. There was the attorney who was part of the hearings, making sure my rights weren't violated. All of these different people involved. And I know that AOT can look different from one area to the next, geographically speaking, and some areas don't necessarily implement that wide continuum of different types of experts being involved. And I've never personally asked you this question, so I'm curious, what did you see that had you specifically value knowledge that if I bring in all of these experts to be part of a team, I'll see better outcomes likely with the people I'm serving, the people who are on the AOT order?
Well, that's an excellent question because it actually explains a bit of why Pennsylvania may be resistant to implementing AOT, why not a single AOT is out there. The first issue is always going to be that people don't want judges and DAs and lawyers involved in their lives. And that especially goes to the medical community. That especially goes to providers. And once they look at the way an AOT is set up, and there are, you're right, everybody can do AOT differently, but as in the drug courts, as in any other therapeutic court, there's a model that develops. And in that model, once the participants and the stakeholders realize it really is a team effort. I am not a physician. I am not a psychologist. I am not a caseworker. I know nothing of that. They are the professionals. But I can bring to the table a mechanism where maybe somebody might listen long enough that the doctor can have an effect, that the caseworker can maybe have them show up on time to take them somewhere for an injection or for medication, or maybe develop a conversation to understand why it is that you're continually going to jail or not going to jail. We are a team, and it works as a team. And in Pennsylvania, my thought is that probably the reason there's a resistance is because people don't understand that concept of AOT. It is not a court banging a gavel, sending somebody to prison. It is not a judge ordering the caseworker to be there at 3 o'clock or else. It is a mechanism to make sure that Derek isn't a loss, that Derek, for example, in our scenario, should be treated with dignity and accord, and everybody should be held accountable to him.
Well, thank you all for sticking with it, and a huge thank you to our moderator, Brett Schultes, and the distinguished group of panelists. I also want to acknowledge the efforts of my Treatment Advocacy Center colleagues, Betsy Johnson and Amy Luce, who work very hard behind the scenes to organize, record, and edit that discussion we just watched. Looks like we have all of my panelists here on video. Nice to see you all. I think for the attendees in the room here, this is the first time we've all gotten together after recording this. So I'm looking forward to having this discussion as we've all watched the recording and are able to sort of reflect on the experience and what we've learned. So as promised, I'd like to open up the floor for questions and comments. Please feel free to use the Q&A and chat function on either Zoom or Hula. I'm monitoring them both. But I'll begin by kicking us off with a few discussion questions from ourselves. So for Brett, I'd love to, what was the response from community leaders after your article came out chronicling Kim's treatment in the mental health and criminal justice systems?
Well, thanks for asking, Elizabeth, and I take it that everybody can hear me okay. It's great to be here today and get another chance to watch through the entire conversation that we had. You know, community, the story. So let me kind of walk back through. We did a story in 2019 that was a profile of Martha, who we have on the call here, Martha's daughter Kim, and that story got interest as part of a series on problem areas in mental health services, but it was sort of one of those things that was part of a conversation, and then many of us moved on. Of course, Martha didn't move on, Kim didn't move on, and so I was quite stunned to learn just about a year later that Kim's situation was so much. You know, that Kim was in prison and that she was in really bad conditions there. So when we produced that story, letting people know about Kim's situation, it was a real shock wave across the community, I think. And it's interesting to think about because I don't necessarily know why exactly. And as a reporter that produces at least a couple stories every week, you can never quite tell when people are going to have a lot of interest in the story or when they won't. But for whatever reason, with this story, it drew really universal outrage from people that this situation was happening. And I know District Attorney Weintraub, who is on here with us today, had indicated to me that, you know, my story was how he had learned about Kim's situation as well. And I think that was what kind of helped him to get the ball moving on some of the actions that he and his office took as well to, you know, pretty quickly get her moved out of there. So I mean, I think it was one of those instances where even though everybody knows that sadly Kim's situation isn't all that unique, it's something that happens over and over again. Just being able to see it and hear it and get those firsthand accounts from other prisoners, I think helped to make it real for people.
Yes, thank you. And Martha, I thank you so much again for sharing your story and Kim's story. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what made you decide to go public with your family's story.
Well, in 2019, I saw that Brett was doing a series on Through the Cracks and talking about these gaps in the mental health system that prevented people like me and my husband from advocating and getting help for my daughter. And I was desperate, quite frankly. I mean, I felt like here I was watching this beautiful young woman just deteriorate right before my very eyes, and we couldn't seem to get anybody to listen or get us help. And being a communicator myself, I felt like if Brett could get the story out there and put a real face on the situation, then maybe A, we could get Kim the help that she needed, but also B, we could raise attention about the way the system really works against family members who need to advocate for people who are too sick to know they're sick.
Yes, and I think that's a nice segue to Sabah. In our scenario, Derek's sister contacts the media to shine light on a breakdown in the mental health system As a family advocate yourself, what factors should family members weigh before contacting the media?
Oh, that is an excellent question. It's always a very sort of difficult space to navigate. For me, as a Black woman, I have to pay careful attention to how the story will be taken from that angle. I can give you examples like Anthony Hill, who was a veteran. His story was always handled delicately by the media. That was the primary concern, that he did not get care. But if you get someone like Walter Wallace or Daniel Prude, it's like these were drug users. So you have to research the media outlet you're looking into. You have to talk to them. You have to remember that it's polite to say no if you don't feel like the story will be handled in the right light and by the right people. Do your homework, be gentle with yourself. I saw one of the attendees mentioned Kim's permission in this, and I still struggle with the same thing. Where does my story end and begin versus where my brother's story end and begin? And that's a personal choice you have to make. There are some things that will protect their image from going out, but what is the cost of our silence? I thought my family was the only family going through this until I began to share my story. I never heard of Treatment Advocacy Center or NAMI until I began to say, my brother is sick, and the media can be a tool for that. But it's always a space you need to navigate. Think of the story you want to tell, and make sure you are empowered to tell that story with the journalist, not just throwing your words out there and getting a result that you didn't intend.
Yeah, Brad, I'm wondering if you have any reflection or response you'd like to share on that, as being a journalist yourself.
Thanks for asking. I know when Martha first reached out to me in 2019, and I went out and visited with her and her husband Paul, and met Kim, that was a very eye-opening day for me, because I did ask Kim's permission to talk with her, and she did give me her permission, and we recorded it and talked. But I went back to my editors, and I sat down with them, and I said, this is really sensitive stuff. And what does it mean when someone gives you permission who also actively is believing things that many of us would say show a disconnection from reality? When you believe that you have to drink water out of a stream because your tap water is tainted, when you won't eat food from the grocery store, when you're sleeping outdoors because of perceived sounds that are in a house or perceived radio frequencies. It's a very sensitive situation. And I think if we didn't have this interesting conflict between respecting a person's agency and rights and trying to help them before they end up in jail or shot by someone or the victim of a crime, I think that's why we're having this conversation, and that tension is just central to what's going on here. So for me, at first I was had a lot of trepidation, was hesitant, but after we did the profile, I was happy I did it. And then there was absolutely no question for me when it came to doing the story about prison, because at that point, you're weighing the potential ability to help someone against any potential use of their likeness or of who they are. And it is tough, and it's a question that if there were hard rules, this would be like a science instead of a craft doing this kind of work. But every single time you have to ask the question over again, every single person. But I just want to stress one more time that the context for a lot of this reporting and the backdrop of me is being someone who is reported on, Ricardo Munoz, who was killed by a police officer in Lancaster whenever he ran out of the house with a knife. Or a person who was just killed in Reading, a person who was killed a few years ago with serious mental illness in State College. These stories are so common of people with serious mental illness not getting the help they need, and then they ultimately find themselves being perceived to have committed a crime, and they get shot and killed by police. So that's what's at stake here, you know?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Brett. And Fred, this is a question from our audience, and I think it's a nice segue for a question for you as a law enforcement officer and director of public safety. A question from Frank Plunkett. How do we provide an appropriate mental health response while still providing safety and security?
Boy, that's the million-dollar question. So what's interesting is in Bucks County or in Bensalem, we just initiated right after November of 2020, a co-responder initiative where we have 2 social workers embedded in the police department responding to 911 calls with police or right after police. And I've been doing this. Next month will be 34 years, and the responding to mental health calls is not getting any better in 34 years. This is probably the first time in the 30-some-odd year career that I've had that we're seeing some relief. And it all came after George Floyd. That now we were able to get the funding to get 2 social workers that are properly trained and have the time, that aren't necessarily need to respond to 911 call after 911 call, but have time to do the follow-up. With people that need it, because a lot of the folks get lost in the system, and the police don't have the resources, the knowledge, the training, or the expertise. You know, we put Band-Aids on bleeding arteries. That's what we're doing in the field. And if you don't get, further surgery on that artery, it's going to be problematic. And, the co-responder initiative, we actually have a meeting tomorrow. We're looking to hopefully to expand this to 39 police departments in the future. But this has really been a godsend. And the police officers, people ask me, well, what do the police think about it? They love it, because the police we know better than anybody else that we don't have the training to deal with these calls or the time or the resources. So I see this as the future of policing, the co-responder model. We saw a big change in the 90s when Bill Clinton reinstituted them. It wasn't new. It was from the 1700s of community policing, the 1800s under Sir Robert Peel. And then we saw the reemergence of it again under the Clinton administration. And now we're going to see the new co-responder model. And police chiefs all over, because I've been speaking about this, are thirsty for it, because they know this is our Achilles heel. And then as Brett just said, folks call 911 in a time of crisis, and they wind up getting killed over it. And that can be avoided. And I'm hoping this new model will avoid it. So I think we're on the road to hopefully dealing with this issue. I don't know if I answered the question. I think I did.
Yeah, I think you did as well. Thank you. District Attorney Weintraub, I understand you have a meeting coming up with some of your local leaders in Bucks County, and I'm wondering, after reflecting on the video we just watched based on our discussions and some of the work that you've done, what you view your role is in advocating and at this upcoming meeting.
I'm a gadfly with a very loud voice, and I think that when this was, some people on this call approached me about AOT. First of all, I knew nothing about it, just like I didn't learn about Ms. Stringer's plight until I read Brett's article. What happens here in the public sector is we're juggling so many balls in the air at once, and unfortunately, everything should be a priority, but not everything can be a priority. So it takes a movement like this to start to create momentum. It takes somebody, as I guess my grandma would call me, a nudge to keep pressing the issue. And I will say it was by design. We have a meeting tomorrow, which is going to be right after this. And I was the one that set the meeting time. It was a little bit of a strategy on my part, because I wanted this to be fresh in my mind. I wanted everybody to feel invigorated about this. So many times in government, as I think you saw in the video, I explained, is you hear about all the roadblocks and the impediments. And Judge Kazin, who I pray will be on that call tomorrow, explained why they don't need to be impediments. You just need to reconfigure. You just need to reprioritize. You already have many of the pieces and the funding in place to make some effective change. And Director Harron used a perfect example. We created literally from scratch, although we copied off of somebody else's paper, which I'm a huge fan of. We created the co-responder model here in Bucks County that was done in other counties. And just like Judge Kazin, I imagine is going to be a very forceful advocate tomorrow in this meeting. We just got to knock the barriers down. Where there's a will, there's a way. And so that's my objective. I'm probably going to make some people are going to be annoyed with me, but I think that if we can have an alternative to putting a mentally ill person in a jail and it's through the AOT, why not try it? Let's try it until we fail, and maybe we won't fail. Maybe we'll succeed. That's my goal.
Great, thank you. And thank you for joining Judge Kazin. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I want to echo that. One of the greatest problems you have in developing any system, and think about this as a group, as a model. When do you ever get to be part of something that's brand new, that gets to change the way we've been doing things for 100 years or more? And that's kind of the thing where you just have to challenge yourself to think outside the box. If it doesn't work, try it again, try it a different way. And you're correct. We're used to doing it one way, so we see them as barriers. And I'm going to steal an old phrase. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, in the criminal justice system, when all you have is a gavel, everyone looks like a defendant. And we need to break that model and understand that that gavel can be used for many, 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 many other things. Those handcuffs doesn't mean when all you have are handcuffs, everyone is a prisoner. You can go on and on with that analogy. We just need to break the cycle of what we're used to using our tools for and try using them in a different way.
Yes, thank you. And to Eric, to you now, thank you so much for sharing your story. It was very insightful. What about your story do you think resonates the most with decision makers?
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, and everyone else also for being part of this discussion and your interest in this matter. I think different parts of my story resonate differently from one decision maker to the next. For some, it may be an epiphany that AOT isn't what forces or coerces a person like me diagnosed with SMI to do one thing or another. It's untreated and undertreated SMI that forces me and coerces me to do things I don't want to do, things I wouldn't ever consider doing while sane, like taking up police, FBI, and Secret Service's time. That's real, by the way. Those aren't just examples I'm making up to prove the value. I actually did waste quite a bit of their time and resources. Wasted a lot of time and energy based on my delusions about stopping assassination attempts of world leaders and preventing World War III. Without a doubt, the most involuntary thing I ever experienced are symptoms of my SMI diagnoses. And to be clear, AOT is what helped free me from the shackles of mental illness so I could enjoy my freedom and pursue my goals and dreams. For other decision makers, what may resonate with them is how exhausted my family must have been over the years, struggling to navigate a system that just simply wasn't prepared to meet the needs of my illness until I found myself arrested and in the criminal justice system first. For most every decision maker, I'd guess they see everything I went through, everything my family went through, and all of the preventable and unnecessary strain that I was on society and myself, followed by everything I've accomplished since then with thanks to AOT. And I bet they see a valuable tool, or I'd hope that at least, that could help others reduce or eliminate problematic symptoms, thoughts, and behaviors associated with serious mental illness, and how AOT can help people with a history of hopelessness, individuals with hopelessness, their families, their loved ones, the communities they live in, people with terribly burdensome SMI-related experiences find happiness and health.
Yes, thank you for that. And there's a question, Eric, in the chat that I think you might be a good person to start, and then I can open up to the rest of the panelists. But the question is, in California, many of the peer/consumer communities are very against AOT as their rights are being infringed. Is there any alternative that the peer community has put forth as an option instead of AOT that would be beneficial to an individual?
That's an excellent question. So being that I'm in Texas, I'm not as familiar with California as someone who's living there having to navigate that system. That said, when I hear conversations or ideas about what should we be doing instead of AOT, or is AOT something that should be done in place of something else? Really what I think it boils down to is that we should have as many tools as possible to meet the needs of the SMI population. So I don't view AOT as something where we should only support AOT and nothing else. And I would hope people who aren't necessarily fans of it can at least appreciate that it should be part of the toolbox for people like me, for families like mine, for all kinds of reasons. We should be doing everything we can to advance humanity, to create progress, to get better treatment and care for others. And AOT is 100% one of the best ways to help remedy many of the complex problems associated with SMI. It's something I've lived. It's something others have lived. And when used appropriately with a judge who's invested, as Judge Kazin was and is, who's part of this discussion, he oversaw my AOT order. Other judges like him, social workers who care, nurses, attorneys, just everyone making sure that a person's rights aren't violated as part of AOT. It's really greater than the sum of its parts. So again, circling back to the question, we shouldn't be viewing solutions or ways of addressing mental illness with, should we do this or should we do this? We should have all of the tools possible available so that when it's appropriate to use, it's there.
If I may add just one thing to Eric's. And I know, Eric, we've had other forum discussions where I'm not betraying any confidences because I know you're okay with me saying this. You know, one of the things, Eric and several others that I'm familiar with that have been through the program, I'll hear, well, but that's one person. Not everyone is going to be, Eric. And that's a bit of an illusion. Oh, forgive me. That's a bit of a mischaracterization. You didn't see Eric when he was in the throes of SMI. I did. You didn't see Eric when helicopters were after one of our state senators and he was camping out in his vehicle. You didn't see Eric with a photo holding 2 Glocks. You didn't see Eric then. No one saw Eric. We see Eric now. What we saw was a serious mental illness taking over Eric at that time. And by the way, Eric was not, and Eric, you'll agree, you even said this, he was not an overnight success. He had 2 or 3 or 4 lapses while he was on AOT until we can finally get him to the point that I think he himself understood that wellness was better than illness. The habit became wellness, not illness. And so that's the first observation. The second observation, as we talk about AOT, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is we need to start the conversation with what AOT is not, okay? AOT is not a dumping ground for individuals with serious mental illness. AOT is not a scheme for government or the courts or the district attorneys or the police officers or doctors to take control of an individual just because they are mentally ill. AOT is not some overlord that's going to take over all individuals just because you have mental illness. I've been released from a hospital and now government wants to take over my life. That is not what AOT is. AOT serves, and I love what Eric just said, as one small tool in a toolbox that makes a difference in that category of individuals. If I cut my finger, I don't go to a heart surgeon. All right. Equally, a heart surgeon, just because I'm bleeding, it doesn't mean that a heart surgeon will always attend to me. What it means is this: when you have a category of individuals who are suffering with serious mental illness, it's a combination of things, and that individual is treatment resistant, and that individual has a history and pattern of refusing treatment. So they get stabilized, they get taken into the hospital and right back out, and then they're off their meds one more time because the illness itself is preventing them from even understanding that things can be better. And when, at least in Texas, that consequence, that combination also leads to a safety issue for the individual, then AOT is appropriate. So when you hear these people saying, AOT is an overreach. If you can do treatment, why in the heck do you need a court? Well, that's exactly it. I agree. If you can do treatment on your own, you don't need AOT. AOT is for that category of individuals where if we can crack the window open just long enough because they've got to report to a judge or because they've got a team surrounded by them or because the judge is requiring the team to do what needs to be done to attend to their needs,
because we build a relationship, whatever, however it works. If we can crack that window open just long enough, it's science, okay? And across the nation, the numbers are the same. You crack the windows open just enough, and we reduce hospitalizations by well over 50%, so sometimes up to 80%. We reduce arrests between 50 and 80%, depending on the program. We reduce. It works because we're treating people like human beings and teaching them, getting them to the point that they can accept wellness. It just takes a court order to get some people to get there. But please don't buy into the argument that AOT is about putting anybody with mental illness under the court's watch. That's not the law. And of all the programs I've seen, that's not what happens.
Thank you, Judge Kaysen. Ben, I'd like to turn to you now. What do you see as the role of research and your health policy studies in influencing policymaking and practice in the community?
Sure. That's a great question, probably one that I ask myself every day. The short answer is it's everywhere. Research is at the core of these interventions. In fact, if you take a step back and you kind of hear the stories and the perspectives that have been mentioned today, these are, empirical perspectives when we're thinking about, good or bad. These are, normative kind of perspectives that are based on numbers and people's experiences. And I think, the role of policy, I see it as both kind of a cause and an effect. During the video, you mentioned actually kind of the phenomenon of deinstitutionalization that spanned decades. That was conscious policy choice at the federal level that started a very long time ago, and in some ways contributed to this crisis that we're seeing. Although there's competing kind of arguments in that respect. Same thing for problem-solving courts, mental health courts being one of them. And just to be clear, I'm knowledgeable about these courts. I'm much less knowledgeable about AOT because I have not, read the literature in that area. But what we do know about problem-solving courts is everything is in the detail, the implementation detail. So the saying goes, you've seen one court, and that's kind of it. But at its core, people study, researchers like me study mental health courts, through the lens of health outcomes. Are people, achieving not only, treatment, but also evidence-based treatment? What kinds of mental health treatment forms do they get? What kind of substance use treatment do they get? Are those evidence-based? Are those the ones that people would get in the community? These are at the end of the day, empirical questions that can be assessed, through in public arenas, but also in research papers. And I would really stress the need for anyone interested here, because I think there's really good questions that are being raised kind of in the chat, to read the literature and for people to make up their own minds, because at base there are conflicting perspectives here. And there's good claims on both sides of the argument. I hate to be lawyerly in my argument, but that's really the case. And I think we have to be very mindful that how much evidence do we need to know to be able to satisfy and to implement these interventions? It's a very hard question. Is one person suffering from it enough to not have them? Is it 10? Is it 100? These are extremely difficult questions that require community involvement. I think that's why kind of democratic participation is such an important kind of part of this decision-making process, because the research can only inform so much. And kind of the last point, which if there's one thing that kind of the audience can get from these perspectives is, the problem-solving courts and criminal justice policies are health policy. At the end of the day, we're talking about people's physical, mental health and their well-being, and eventually this leads to other kind of downstream effects, their ability to be integrated in the community, to get jobs, to be fulfilled. And these are extremely important questions, and we've seen so many deficiencies, especially since the beginning of the pandemic. It's really exposed so many of our flaws. And I think it's very, very important to make those two connections and to kind of reassess our assumptions about what this community needs. I think it's very important. And it goes from I guess philosophical or sociological things like social fabric, where if you have people who've had encounters with the criminal justice system, what will that do to their families? I mean, we've seen beautiful and moving testimony already. There's true impacts at the community level, but also there's also kind of the classic policy technocratic things, like how can we make sure that these people have access to health insurance? How can we make sure that there's community health centers close to their homes? These are all moving pieces that require certainly more than one brain to put together, more than one research brain. I think that I see great value in these conversations, because the more perspectives we can put together, the more we're going to be able to spotlight kind of the deficiencies and also move the research agenda forward. And I think we've seen 2020 was I think a crucial experience in that respect. And I think as a health policy researcher, my agenda was shaped very much by it. So once again, these are important questions, and thank you for having me.
Hey Ben, you can be laurely all you want. I brought my AOT gavel, which is like the smallest gavel in the world. Okay.
Yes, and thank you for that, Ben. I think that really is what is one of the things that I find so unique about the Law Enforcement Public Health Association, as well as this conference, is that it is that acknowledgement that the public health of every country in the world and law enforcement are very much intertwined. And so this conference is, I think, from 2012, really bringing all these diverse people together to acknowledge that and to work through it. The welcoming session yesterday with Philadelphia leadership was very insightful in their commitment to recognizing the role of public health and law enforcement in the community. So thank you for that. Brett, I'd like to turn to you as a very similar question that I just gave to Ben, but based on your experience in reporting and sort of taking a one step higher about what is journalism's role in shaping policy?
Very interesting question, and one that is being explored in a lot of areas right now, even outside of health journalism and mental health journalism. I think that the role of journalism is to tell true stories that really matter, and that there is a moral underpinning to journalism, that's inherent. And sometimes people will say, well, just, tell the facts. Well, there's an endless amount of facts in the world. And we all know that some facts matter and that some facts don't. And the moral dimension is, that we're trying to help the community at large, and that we are trying to improve circumstances for people who may not have anyone to look out for themselves. At least I am. You get into conversations with other people about what they're doing. I don't think it's really a journalist's job to advocate for a policy. But I do think it's a journalist's job to point out what a situation is in a nuanced way, and allow that nuance to kind of push for the policies that that make sense. I also think there's something called solutions journalism, where you offer up as examples, as information to people. Hey, this is something that has worked elsewhere. I'm not telling you that this is what we should do, but we are seeing that this has worked in some other states, And when Treatment Advocacy Center first was talking to me about AOT, I mean, I had many of the same questions other people said. How does it work? How can it work if it's not, if it doesn't actually have a mandate hooked onto it? And then I saw some of the successes he had in other states, and I've kind of come to the conclusion for myself that, well, I don't know if I know that it works in Pennsylvania, and certainly we haven't given it a try, but we know it's worked in some other places, and that perhaps it's worth giving a try. Does that kind of answer your question? It's, again, there's always, you have to take it on a case-by-case basis.
Yes. Well, and I've been following your reporting about the vaccine distribution in Pennsylvania, which is another example of how highlighting some of the challenges and what's going on to help influence the distribution.
Yeah, and with vaccine distribution, that's a real interesting one, because we're all kind of trying to figure out what's going on because we've never quite lived through something exactly like this. And so, yeah, you write a story about a mass vaccination site, and people think that you're advocating for mass vaccination sites, but it may not necessarily just be the case. You're just kind of saying, hey, this is going on.
Right. Thank you for that. So I'd like to, in the chat, Jean asked a question to Brett, but I think it applies to everyone really on this call. So I'd like it to open up to anyone who'd like to respond about how the work that we all do has some sort of segued into social work in some ways, and how to the value that this type of work and advocating and caring for people with severe mental illness has added to your personal well-being. District Attorney or Director Fred, if you have any thoughts about that.
Sure, I'll be your guinea pig. I one thing that I preach here, we have 42 assistant district attorneys. We have a staff of 100 here. And one thing that I preach to them as these cases tend to roll by us in an assembly line fashion is that each person that you're encountering is an individual. And it's been echoed so many times here, and who really turned the light on for me is Eric Smith. This is a person with a past, with a family, with aspirations, with a job that needs to get back on track in some fashion. And so when I am approached by, it could be anybody. Sometimes it's the county commissioner. Sometimes it's a citizen who has an issue, to say, hey, this is my brother or my son or my daughter. I think they certainly deserve at the least that we examine their case and try to balance. Unfortunately, by the time it gets to me, that means the person has been charged with a crime or is about to be. But that we can balance their mental health needs with the needs to keep everybody safe. And when we can come up with a very good solution in an individual case like that is sometimes difficult, of course I feel better, because it's rare that in the criminal justice system that you have everybody is happy with an outcome. It's rare. But we have been able to, through looking at these cases individually, to tailor or fashion justice as it should be, and that is on an individual basis. So I would say that the overarching goal to try to make justice very specific, we're taking a step-by-step approach, and we're getting better at it every day, and that makes me feel good.
And we look at it here, and I try to make sure that the men and women of the Bensalem Police Department, and I know that the philosophy goes throughout Bucks County, is that our job is not, about arresting people. That's a very small part of the job. Our job is about providing a service and preventing victims. And someone that's suffering from a mental illness or a drug addiction, they're a victim as well. And we have to be able to give them the resources and the tools for them and their family, because the criminal justice system is not the answer for incarceration for so many reasons, but also no one ever really talks about it that much, but it costs so much more to incarcerate someone than it does to give them treatment. And, we have to think about that. And incarceration, it's just a revolving door. But if you get them treatment, you're going to stop it, and you're going to stop the cycle. And we have to really personalize it. And, here, myself included, I've had in my family, close family, mental health issues and drug addiction. And we get it. And a lot of the officers have experienced the same thing. You know, the statistics now are 1 in 2 people are going to have, you know, some sort of major social issue close to them. And I think that really humanizes it for us. But it's not. Arresting people is just such a small part of the job. It's a necessary part of the job, and it'll never go away. I'm not saying that, but it's not the end all goal here. The goal is to prevent a victim in 10 minutes from now, to prevent one less victim. That's our goal.
Yes, thank you. And Judge Kazin, the last word here. No pressure.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about individualized treatment, you know, it's no coincidence. There's a reason these are called problem-solving courts, and that is that there's a problem that precedes the issue. You know, mental health, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, it's a chemical substance abuse, etc. And it's different than, you know, if I get in trouble theoretically and I make a foolish mistake and I go to court, then maybe that model works for me and others. Don't do it again, or this is what's going to happen. Well, it's the last time I ever do that. But when you are also having to deal with the problem in a problem-solving court, in this case, mental health, when you're also having to deal with serious mental illness, an illness which has a component that doesn't even let you see that you have the illness, then it's impossible to have a cookie cutter kind of model to it in the criminal justice system. You can't just bang your gavel and go DWI 6 months, DWI 6 months, DWI 6 months, probation, fine. You can't. You have to get to the source of the problem, the issue. And that's why individualized treatment and individualized attention by law enforcement and by the courts is the new way to go, because if you can attack the problem, it doesn't reoccur. That poor decision-making isn't subject to some other influence. You know, we're all human. We're still going to make dumb choices in our lives, but at least we're not making dumb choices in our lives because we don't know we're making dumb choices and something's making us do it. You'd be surprised the number of people who go through AOT have that epiphany and that awakening. And by the way, I have to compliment Eric for his courage. Most people, when they get to Eric, are not, I'm done. I'm just going to go live my life happily. Eric has the courage to say, not only am I going to live my life happily, but I'm going to let people share my story. So that doesn't mean that there aren't others. But these individuals, once you get to the problem, if now they make a stupid choice in life, that's their stupid choice in life. You know, but you compound that with mental illness, addiction, etc., until law enforcement and the criminal justice system figures out a way to address the problems first. It's a revolving door, and it just spins quicker. You'd be surprised the number of people at the end who look at me. I had a family member who videotaped their son during the throes of their illness, and then after AOT and was doing much better and had figured out what worked for him to maintain his health. He looked at that video at the very end, and he looked at everybody and says, "How could you let me be this way?" You'd be surprised how often that happens.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that, Judge Kazin. And on behalf of myself and my colleagues at the Treatment Advocacy Center and our moderator, Brett Schultes, and everyone here, all of our panelists, I want to thank you for joining us this morning. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. So thanks, everyone. Nice to see you all again.